As we're familiar in Manchester, England, unfortunately on Yom Kippur, on that holy day, there were two people that were killed in cold blood and many other people that were injured during that time period. Something that unfortunately here in Eretz Yisrael we're a little bit too familiar with, but here it is finding itself overseas. And I have to come out with an idea which tremendously was me'orer me when I heard of such an event, and something that is a very global idea in Judaism, and that is, what exactly is the connection between the fact that they hate us over here in Eretz Yisrael, they're not pleased with the decisions that the government is making here in Eretz Yisrael, with a few English British people in the north of England, over there in Manchester. Why exactly is one connected to the next? Over here, there are a bunch of pleasant, calm English people that are going to shul and doing their thing, and they're living a simple British life. What does that have to do with a bunch of Israelis that are making a bunch of decisions over here and continuing a war which they're not pleased with? But the Goyim are teaching us an incredible thing, which we always have to remember. Amongst us, amongst Jews, there is no such thing as someone British or English. There is no such thing as an American. There's no such thing as a French, and there's no such thing as an Israeli. There's one thing, it's a Jew. We are one specimen, we are one being that is seen as one entity. And we are always known as a Jew. It doesn't matter what nationality or citizenship you belong to, because we have no nationality. We might be born in specific countries, we might be born in separate places, but we have one common property amongst all of us, and that is that we are Jewish and all connected as one, no matter where we find ourselves. The Talmud Devorah, the great Rav Moshe Cordova, the great Kabbalist, writes in his Sefer Talmud Devorah, which is somewhat of a Kabbalistic Sefer, under one of the Midot over here, he enumerates the 13 Midot, 13 Midas of Rachmanut, of pity that Hashem has on us. And one of them is known as She'erit Nachlato. She'erit, She'er, has to do with a idea of connection, of relationship, a family connection. And he's trying to say that we have a family relationship and connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what it means by Sher. He says, Loshen Sher Basar, Sheri Nechlato. That's why in Tehillim we're referred to as Biti, Achoti, Ima. We're referred to as my daughter, my sister, my mother. Because our relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, with Hashem, and as a result of that to one another, is one of family. We feel the pain of one another. It is very different from a goy who watches the news, from a non-Jew who sits and watches the news, and he feels what we call rachmanut. It feels unpleasant. He feels bad for him. Oh well, okay, time to change the channel. I think I remember I have a better show going on right after that talk today. As opposed to by us, we feel what we call a kev, a pain, a distress, a hurt, a grieving. When another Jew hears about a Jew, it's not just about watching the news and feeling, oh wow, what a bummer. It has to do with much more than that. You feel almost like a family member is being hit when we watch when we watch some type of tragedy like we saw in Manchester that happened, or when we see it in Eretz Yisrael and we're feeling from one country to another country, we feel the pain that is going on amongst us. Just like the Goyim understand that if the Jews in Israel are being chutzpanim, if we don't like them, then we don't like any Jews. Also the ones in England, also the ones in America, also the ones in France, they're all a bunch of good for nothings because they don't care about any of us, because we all are in the same boat. We're all considered as one. If they believe that we are one, then what's wrong with us believing it also? Here's a story which is an incredible lesson which basically brings out the same idea. In 1894, a person by the name of Drumont in France gave out a bunch of reports which ended up being proven as false reports, but nobody really cared for the fact that it was false, to accuse someone by the name and the famous name of Alfred Dreyfus. A person who was a captain in the French army, which no one would have ever heard about before and after. A very simple guy, one who never made any noise. He was a secular Jew, nothing to do with Judaism. Didn't have to practice. He wasn't practicing anything, and he was a good French. He was a good French soldier, and that's what it was all about. He was a captain in the artillery section. Al Kopanim, he was accused by this Drumont with serving for the German alliance and trying to go ahead and find military secrets of the French in order to help out the German cause. That was what he was appealing to at the time. And there was very, very little evidence of any of this being true. So they falsified a few papers, tried to get out what they called the secret file, which the other side, the defensive side, never even saw this magical secret file. And with these forged documents that were made, he was eventually pronounced that he will go to what was known as Devil's Island, in Devil's Island for the rest of his life. He was renounced from his position as being captain, obviously. He was put up for public ridicule. He was driven through the states where he was given a bunch of booze and death to the Jews, which was stated at that time in a very innocent way that the Jews had nothing per se to do with this. And he was taken to this place that's known as Devil's Island. It was a jail. It was a type of Alcatraz, that was a place that he was at the time. And that was it. His life, in his eyes, was over. That's it. Whatever happened, happened. It was nothing to do. Within 2 months, at the end of December in 1894, he was pronounced basically a dead man. It was all over. You're going to be there for the rest of your life. Little did he realize that a civil war came out and abrupted in France at the time, the Dreyfus and the anti-Dreyfus, which had to do with this type of phenomenon. Are we an official anti-Semitic country? Meaning, we're going to completely go and make a fashion out of anti-Semitism? Everybody knew that the accusations here were completely false. It was almost clear that the evidence was weak as anything. It was based on one or two people's testimony, and it was almost it was a finished deal. But people felt like this is another step in the level of anti-Semitism that is going on in France, until eventually 5 years later, in 1899, he was called back for a second trial. After being on that Alcatraz over there in Devil's Island there for 5 years, he was called back, where the case was reassessed, and eventually he was considered guilty, but he would only be punished with 5 years in Devil's Island, which he already served. What a coincidence. And they said, yes, you were guilty, but it's okay, we'll let you off with 5 years. And he was brought back to France, and that was the end of his sentence, because they knew that he was really innocent, but they didn't want to kind of admit it. Eventually he was acquitted when they realized that the whole thing was a big farce, and he even was able to go back to the army. I have no idea why he was interested in going back to being a captain, but he went back and he was knighted again to go ahead and become in his position. This Dreyfus never really appreciated the role of providence that he was assigned in history. Eventually that would lead to the Herzl, who was also a Frenchman, who would go ahead and Herzl and start the whole Zionist movement, as we are so familiar with. That's not the point here, though, because I do want to mention there was a rabbi there, which was someone trying to protect Judaism during these trials. And one of the accusations that was said against the Jewish people is that you write in your writings over there, it's a Gemara in Yevamot, then it says that Atem kruyim adam, vehem einam kruyim adam. You are called a man, and they, meaning the goyim, are not called a man. They're not considered a person. Excuse me? Are you saying we're not people? You are people and we're not people? What are you calling us? Animals? Atem kruyim adam, vehem kruyim adam. You see that these Jews are very, they look down on us. They look at us in a very downtrodden way, and therefore they wanted to accuse him of spying and treason, for that matter. in which the rabbi responded so succinctly, very similar to the point that we are making today. He said, what is an Adam? An Adam, a person, is a body that is made up of many facets: a head, arms, legs, a torso. And even if you hurt one little toe with a needle that is spiking in there, the whole entire body feels it. He's in absolute pain no matter what part of his body you seem to kind of injure, you seem to give trouble to. He says that is exactly the difference between us and them. When a Jew feels a pain of one, he feels it for everyone. Dreyfus is here sitting in France, and people in Ohio are upset. People in the other end of Poland are sitting and up in arms about this trial that is going on. Who do you know? Is he your friend? Is he your brother? Is he your father? What do you care about this Dreyfus guy? The answer is that every Jew feels the kev, he feels the pain, he feels the sorrow of another one, not just like a piece of news, but like my own relative that is being affected. Atem kruyim adam, you are called a person, as opposed to by the goyim. It doesn't work like that. They hear, a Frenchman can hear about some French guy that ended up getting submitted and had to be turned into Devil's Island, and he'll say, wow, what a bummer. Guess he's a French guy, he probably deserved it anyways, and fully moves on with life and changes the channel. He doesn't get affected by it. Exactly the lesson that we see over here and that we're learning from what the Goyim unfortunately sometimes have to teach us. We are all sherit nachlato. We each feel the pain of the other. As the Yushalmi writes, the mitzvah of Nekama, the Isser of Nekama. When we talk about an Isser of having revenge on someone else, the Gemara brings a dimyon, a comparison to if the right hand takes a knife and hits the left hand and cuts it and gets a serious wound. Does the left hand get revenge, take the knife back and start cutting the right hand back? Of course not. It's the same hand. It hurts. The same right when it hurt the left. If the left goes and hits the right, it's just going to cause more pain because you're all part of the same body. So of course one of us and all of us have to care for one another just like we're one of each other, and that's exactly what it says in the Torah Devorah. Kol Yisrael, Hemsher B'Saro, Kol Elu Em Elu. Each one cares for the other, and he says, therefore, Ein Roy LaAdam Liot Chafetz B'Tovato Shel. Therefore, you should always care about the best for your friend. Ve'eino Tov, and your eye should be as good as you can for your friend. Sharei Hu Mamish, because he is you. He and you are the same person. What's the difference? How can we go ahead and feel divisiveness, frustration, irritation, and sin and hatred for another person when he's just an extension of us, no matter what he looks like? In the end of the day, we should have pity for him. We should have rachmanut in a bad situation. What can I do to help him? How can I help him to get out of this situation? And this is all connected to the whole holiday that we have now of Sukkot. Because if you pay attention, the whole holiday of Sukkot is all about Achdut, about oneness. When we talk about Ufros Aleinu, Sukkot Shlomecha. Sukkah and Shalom always come together. We always say in Arvit, Sukkot Shlomecha, the Sukkah and Shalom. Why is Sukkah and Shalom come together? Because the Sukkah is parallel to the Ananei HaKavod, to the clouds of glory. Who brought the clouds of glory? Aaron HaKohen. Aaron was Roidev Shalom, Oyev Shalom, Roidev Shalom. Aaron HaKohen was the man of peace. He was the man who always made Shalom Bayit. He always made peace between husband and wife. And he was the one who brought the clouds of glory around. That's why Ufras Aleinu, Sukkot, the Sukkah, and Shalom always go together. Not only that, we know the Daled Minim, which we shake. Of course, the 4 species which we shake, the lulav and etrog, are parallel to 4 different types of people. I'm sure we're familiar with. We've heard the etrog is the one who has good mitzvot and Torah, and the other one who has half and half. And the Aravot don't have either. All different people, and we put them all together, and there's an idea of Achdut. The whole entire holiday here has to do with the idea of togetherness, of Achdut, of being together. Why? What's the connection with the fact that I go out into some hut and sit outside, cold or hot or whatever the weather is, and I go sit outside? What does that have to do with peace? But the answer says, Reb Desmond, with this we finish, is that the second that we stop taking our goof, when the more you focus on your body and your physical needs and the myself and the me that has to do with it, the more hatred there is in the world. Because the more you have, the less I have. The more I see you're successful, the less I see I'm successful. The more I compare myself with other people, and there's hatred, there's war. All war has to do with a focus on the physical body, how great I am. The biggest wars of the Romans Romans or the Germans by the Nazis had to be where people were focused on the body and the Aryan race or the beauty of the body because they were so into themselves. And anyone who kind of steps on my feet or shows that they own something and they have some other property besides my own, I feel that they are already taking away from me. They're stepping on my boundaries. That's the yesod of the physical body. As opposed to when someone strips away his body, when a person's connected only to his soul, when he finds himself completely connected to the neshama, so we are all connected. Kol Yisrael arevim zeh b'zeh. The second we step out of the sukkah, we do what we call bittul yesh. We leave the permanent house that we step in, and we go out into a world of spirituality. We go out into a world of Hevel Havalim Amar Kohelet, to look and realize that the world is not everything that it's cracked up to be. When we live in a world of spirituality, on the contrary, the more you have, the happier I am. You realize in the world of spirituality, we say, Kol Yisrael Arevim zeh b'zeh. When you do a mitzvah, I get a mitzvah. When you do a sin, you're hitting me also. It's affecting me. You understand? When someone else does something positive, I love it. When I have tzaddikim in the world, when I know there's other tzaddikim in the world, when there's gedolim around, it helps me. It pushes me up. The more we are in a spiritual world, the better it is when we are surrounded, hand in hand, together, working together. And we're working side by side. Together we are all one, that are working as one, forever one. If we work as forever one, then we can really go far. You understand this idea? That's the idea of the sukkah, of shlomecha, of the peace. And peace really comes. When is real peace? When you have a spiritual drive. When your focus is much more on being real, on being amiti, being the truth. Trying to focus on what needs to be done. Stop worrying about the pina coladas and the vacations and all the other ta'avot that we're sitting trying to do. When you're busy doing that, then you start getting affected. The frustrations kick in. If you are able to live and abide to what the Sukkah tells us of the Bittul Yesh, then suddenly you feel connected to every other Jew. Suddenly you love the fact that he's doing what he's doing, I'm doing what I'm doing, and there's a peace amongst all of us. That's real shleimut, that's shalom, and that's the lesson that we're learning if it's from Dreyfus. That's a lesson that we learned from this pigua that happened in Manchester. They killed people in Manchester because of a war that's happening in Israel. Doesn't that tell you something? That tells you something about all of us, that we are all sitting on the same piece of land together. We're in the same place together. We are all connected by one Torah, and we should love it. Look how many relatives we have in this incredibly glorious, large, and beautiful Jewish family. Shabbat shalom.